Well, it's a whole credit system too, hours credits thing, and how to split it up evenly. Okay, so back to our friends, the prokaryotes. I'm sorry, eukaryotes. So we started off talking a little bit about protists, and we know that they are some of our single-celled eukaryotic members. And then the process of endosymbiosis we'd started to discuss. So endosymbiosis refers to one species living inside another host species, and the process by which eukaryotes gained mitochondria and chloroplasts. So this is how we think eukaryotic cells evolved from prokaryotic cells. Plasma membranes were developed around genetic material, cordoning them off, and then some prokaryotic cells actually incorporated themselves into these more complex eukaryotic cells. And we think that that is the origin of things like mitochondria and chloroplasts. The reason they think this is because mitochondria and chloroplasts actually have their own genetic material. So your cells, human cells, your mitochondria has its own genetic material. Your cells can make more mitochondria when needed. So if your cells need to make more energy, they can actually make more mitochondria. Do you have a question?
Well, I was just to put a finer point on that, if the mitochondria was a prokaryotic cell, how is it that it knows when the eukaryotic cell
No, was. We're talking thousands of years ago. That is now an organelle in the prokaryotic world. Eukaryotic world. Yes? So they no longer, the mitochondria can no longer live on its own.
mitochondria can no longer be a
Correct. Yeah. So when we talk about protist groups called protists, consists of multiclades, divisions, but remain a convenient term to refer to eukaryotes that are not plants, not animals, or not fungi. So all the little guys basically are grouped into the protist category. Algae. An algae is an autotroph. What's an autotroph? Yeah, so it produces its own food with the help of what? Sunlight, through the process of photosynthesis. That didn't work because I pushed it on the wrong computer. I'll be fine. All right, heterotroph. What's a heterotroph? Yeah, so they're going to eat others. So some protists eat bacteria or other protists. Some protists are fungi-like because they eat organic material. So they're similar decomposer-like actions. They get molecules from decomposed organic matter and they absorb them into their system. Other protists are what we call parasites. And they're going to derive their nutrients by getting them from other living cells. Hosts, we call them. Sometimes parasites can kill their hosts if they get too greedy. But many parasites have learned not to do that, because what happens to them when their host dies? They die too. So trypanosoma causes something called African sleeping sickness, and it's a parasite that likes to hang out in blood cells. Yeah. Yeah, they can actually get in through any little orifices too as well. That's why I myself have Africa is not on the list. There's South America, not on the list of my vacation places or destinations. So Heterotroph parasites, trypanosomes, mixotroph euglena, kind of getting nutrients from the environment, but also has the ability to make its own nutrients. So there's another term, mixotroph, combination of the two types of food gathering. Oceans, lakes, ponds, soil, leaf litter, the bodies of host organisms are all places where we can find these guys. Some mutually beneficial relationships can be seen in algae, places where reefs and corals are. And we also have cellulose digesting protists that hang out where? Do you know where they live? No. In the mouth of termites. Termites can't digest cellulose. Did you know that? But the protists that live in their mouth can digest cellulose. So they're breaking down something, and then the termite is doing what? Swallowing it and getting the benefit that protist provided it in its mouth. Well, that's an interesting one. So protozoa are protists that live primarily by ingesting food, taking it in from their environment. When we look at a drop of pond water, and you looked at some protists in lab, right? All those wonderful little creatures you looked at under the microscope, those are all in your typical freshwater pond. So no, hopefully not. You find these in freshwater environments. If you go to that beautiful place in the forest with the rolling stream and the lovely clear water that's running through it, don't bend down to take a drink of that wonderful, lovely, clear water. Because even though it might taste good then, it might wreak havoc later. Yeah, not a good idea. Because upstream, a raccoon might have taken a little poop for himself there and left you with some of these guys. So Giardia, which is a flagellated protist, is very common in freshwater like that, running freshwater. Trichomonas is also another nasty little critter. It's a sexually transmitted disease, and it can wreak havoc as well. Amoebic dysentery and amoebas in different water supplies. That's why you're not supposed to drink the water when you go to Mexico. Can cause all kinds of problems, digestive issues. These little guys are really nasty. There's spikes behind it. They're lighting it up so you can see the spikes. But that can cause all sorts of problems with digestive issues. These are some of the nastier ones in the protist family. Not necessarily nasty though, but can cause problems with you. Protozoans with flagella are called flagellates, and flagella allows the cell to do what? Yeah, to move, to go from one place to another. Typically free living, but some are nasty parasites. Amoebas. Did you get to see any amoebas when you looked under the microscope? She didn't have any of those. Amoebas are kind of neat. They have that ability to create arms around things, which we call amoeboid movement because of the way amoebas move. They have a lot of flexibility with their body shape, and they have the absence of permanent organelles. So they can create them and change them so they can move. They have a cytoskeleton. Yes. Well, that's what gives them form. But actually taking fluid within themselves and pushing it into one place or another is what allows them to move. Most species move and feed by means of pseudopodia. Pseudopodia are false feet or false arms. And that's what allows amoebas to move. guys are nasty. Other protozoas with pseudopodia include forams. They have sort of a shell and spikes.
Where do you get them?
Hmm?
Where do you get them?
Where do you find them? Again, freshwater environments, typically warmer freshwater environments. You see them associated a lot with, oh, my brain just went dead, coral in coral regions. Those spikes, imagine those hanging out around the cells of your small intestine. Yeah, good. Good protection for the organism, though. Some of them have complexes that can help them penetrate tissue. Apicomplexans are named for the structure at their apex or tip, and they're specialized for getting into other cells. So typically at their apex or tip, they have a little sac of chemicals, enzymes, that digest things. All are parasitic and all are able to cause serious human disease. Malaria, for example. Plasmodium falciparum is a nasty little protozoa that can burrow its way into your blood cells and cause all kinds of problems there. And there's a picture of those. Yep. A Plasmodium is the protist in where? Yeah, exactly. Mouth, proboscis. So it passes that protist into your body. So it's the vector. It's the organism that passes another organism to you, which happens to be parasitic. Correct. So this is a red blood cell, and that is a little sac of chemicals allowing that parasite to get in. Toxoplasma and toxoplasmosis. Anybody have cats?
I had toxoplasmosis.
Yeah. Yeah. So where is it?
It's an infection in blood.
Well, it gets into your blood, but where do you get it from?
Cat litter, cat urine.
The feces. Okay, so a lot of these guys that we're talking about here are passed through the feces of other animals. Can you pass parasites on to others? Yes. That's one of the ways they get out and go to infect someone else. They create their eggs and they have a whole bunch of different life cycles that might run through different systems in your body. But their way of infecting others is to pass their eggs in your feces. Now, what's going to help us prevent infections like that? Don't have cats. Or don't do what? Don't handle feces. Unfortunately, some of those eggs are very, very light. So some of them can get airbound, and then you end up swallowing them or inhaling them. Did anybody ever have pinworm when you were little? Hanging out in the cat, well, not the cat litter box. That's what we called it because I had pinworm. The sandbox. Okay?
A giant cat litter box.
The giant cat litter box, yeah. And those eggs are very, very light. So when someone in your family gets pinworms, everybody has to do what? Yeah, they have to go on the same medication because the chances of them being infected are very, very high. So yeah, these guys have a way of living. And they've developed some good mechanisms of infecting other organisms. Ciliates, protozoa that are named for the use of those little hair-like structures called cilia. And they're going to help move them through their environment, but they're also going to help them what? Yeah, eat. Push food into their mouth as well. Mostly free-living, non-parasitic. Freshwater ciliates like paramecium are not parasitic. They don't bug you, but they eat things from the environment in that freshwater environment. Include heterotrophs and mixotrophs. So when we look, and you guys looked at these guys, right?
Yep.
You see the little hair-like extensions can move water and nutrients into their little cellular mouths. We have slime molds, very similar to fungi in appearance and lifestyle, but are more closely related to amoeba. So maybe this is what you were trying to refer to? They hang out in groups and create slime. Yep. Plasmodial slime molds and cellular slime molds. So they kind of hang out together in almost like a colony.
So is that what that root system, it looks like a root system, that's just how they're getting nutrients?
Yep, exactly. So name for the feeding stage in their life cycle, an amoeboid mass called a plasmodium. These are decomposers on the forest floor and can become very, very, very large. Important, right? Why are they important? Yep, they're going to help recycle a lot of organic material from dead matter. Cellular slime molds have a very interesting and complex life cycle. They have a feeding stage, a swarming stage, and this is probably what you read, the slug-like colony that can move and function as a single unit, and a stage in which they generate that stalk multicellular reproductive structure. So that's what you're talking about. Yep. So there's a whole bunch of them in a mass. And this is probably a better representation of it here. I think they just caught it looking like that. It's probably not typically looking like that, more typical like this. And then they grow these reproductive structures that help them. Correct. And then we'll go somewhere else. So a lighter structure that can be carried by air is typically what we see. Algae, unicellular and colonial algae. And again, living together in a big group has its benefits, right? But sometimes not so beneficial. Because when I'm by myself, what can I do? I get all the food. But when I live in a group, I have to share. So there are downfalls and benefits to both ways of living. But photosynthetic protists, whose chloroplasts support food chains in freshwater and marine ecosystems, are algae. And you're probably familiar with algae that grows in your lake near the end of the summer. Sometimes they take off and get crazy, and we can see groups of them floating on top of the water. Those are referred to many times as algal blooms. Many unicellular algae are components of plankton. And plankton is single-celled organisms, basically, that hang out in the water. If you took a drop of pond water, you could see some of the members of plankton in your pond water. Did you have a question? No? So a couple of different ones we find with respect to unicellular algae, dinoflagellates. And these guys have little flagella that are going to allow them to move through their environment. Diatoms have a tough outer structure and typically live in areas that are a little more rough. Contains silica. Silica is glass. So what do you make glass from? Sand. Yeah, so sand and sand-like material. We see the outer shell of these little guys. Similar. And then green algae. Green algae is green because it has what? Yeah. So unicellular in most freshwater lakes and ponds. Some are flagellated. Some form colonies. We see a ball of these guys, hollow ball, called volvox. Did you guys look at volvox? Yeah. So that's actually a hollow ball of flagellates. So that's more than one organism. So these are some of the neat diatoms that we can see in a single drop of pond water. Then we have groups of larger multicellular marine algae called seaweeds. They grow on or near rocks. Why do they grow on or near rocks? Yeah, it's their support. It's their foothold. Similar to plants because of their photosynthetic abilities, and they seem to have evolved very closely related to each other. Are more closely related to unicellular algae, and we can often eat them. Anybody ever eat seaweed? Where do you find seaweed?
Sushi.
Yeah, sushi. That's what they wrap sushi with. Is it good?
No, I don't eat sushi.
You don't eat sushi? Sushi, see? I will not eat raw fish because I have taken parasitology. But they don't, they make cooked sushi too, which is pretty good. Seaweeds are and they're also very high in nutrients. Correct. I've had sushi that has cooked stuff in it. That I'll eat.
Smoked eel.
Ooh, smoked eel.
Smoked.
Okay. I used to eat eels. Quick little Christmas Eve story. My maiden name is Trevisano. I'm very Italian. And on Christmas Eve in an Italian family, you eat the 7 fishes. Have you ever heard of that? So you try to eat 7 different fish in your meal on Christmas Eve. And eel was one of them. My father used to go into the North End in Boston to get the eel. That and something called bacala. Has anybody ever?
Great.
It's dried out salted codfish that they used to get and soak for like 4 days. Cod cakes are good. But I was never a fan of the eel part of the meal because they have lots of bones. Numbness, yeah, no. No thanks. Nope, nope. I was into the haddock. I was good with the haddock. So we have green algae, we have red algae, and we have brown algae, including kelp. And again, when we run into a big problem on our planet and start running out of food, guess what we're going to probably start eating lots more of? Yeah, these guys, these algae, because again, they're very high in nutrients. So, evolution connection, the origin of multicellular life. Multicellular organisms have very specialized cells that are dependent on each other. So you are a multi-celled organism. Can a small group of your cells live on their own? No, because you need all of your other systems within you as an organism to support those cells. So very important with respect to feeding, waste disposal, gas exchange, protection. So an example in you as humans, feeding. You have a system that's responsible for breaking big things down into small things. What system is that? That's your digestive system. Then you have a waste disposal system. You have a couple of them actually. Urinary system. Your skin. Your, kidneys. Gas exchange, who's that? Yeah, your respiratory system. Protection. Bones. So you have several different systems that work together to help all of these things in you as an organism. Colonial protists likely formed the evolutionary link between unicellular and multicellular organisms. Colonial green algae volvox is an example. Demonstrates one level of specialization and cooperation. So even though in that volvox we have several different organisms, they can't survive without being together. So there we see that might be the connection.
So would they still be called single cellular organisms if they
Well, we don't call volvox single-cellular organisms. They're more colonial organisms. So,
Not really known as like multicellular.
No, they're called colonial because they can't live without each other.
right, but you could argue, if you wanted to, that they were multicellular because they have different cellular components. So, my friends, that's chapter 15. Any questions? Any questions on what's going to be on the exam?
Yeah, what's going to be on the exam?
So what's going to be on the exam? The PowerPoints, 3 of them, yes? 13, 14, the ecology one,
19.
which was, yeah, kind of a smattering of all those chapters, and then chapter 15, okay? When I sit down to make your exam, no, when I sit down to make your exam, well, how am I going to do it?
PowerPoint.
I'm going to take the PowerPoints out and I'm going to make questions that we've discussed from those PowerPoints, okay? So I know that some of the chapters have a whole bunch of other stuff. We're not going there. I'm only going to test you on what is on those 3 PowerPoints, okay? Does everybody know where to get them? They're up online. You have them printed out? Yes? So we good? All right. So who's not here today?